Ladies and gentlemen, do you know why the world fears the man who walks alone? Because he cannot be influenced. He cannot be bought. He cannot be broken. When a man chooses solitude over approval, discipline over distraction, and mastery over mediocrity, he steps into his real power. He becomes dangerous not to others, but to every limitation that once ruled his mind. Most people chase comfort, applause, companionship, but the man who walks alone learns something they never will, how to lead himself. And in leading himself, he discovers the crown was never given by others. It was claimed in silence. This isn't loneliness. This is sacred isolation, a deliberate departure from the noise of the crowd. Not because he hates the world, but because he seeks clarity, the kind you can only find when you're willing to face yourself completely. He walks through the fire, not because he's forced to, but because he understands. Greatness demands solitude. Every king you admire once walked as a shadow, unnoticed, uncelebrated, unseen. He bled in silence. He fought battles no one applauded. He grew roots in the unseen. This path is painful. It strips you of illusions. It demands that you stand without validation, act without praise, and persist without company. But through that pain, he builds his foundation. Through that darkness, he finds his inner light. The man who walks alone learns that every step forward, no matter how silent, echoes across eternity. He becomes a force not because he shouts, but because he doesn't need to. His presence commands attention, not by noise, but by depth. In a world desperate for attention, he remains grounded. While others follow trends, he follows truth. And while many seek to be seen, he chooses to see clearly. If you're watching this, it's because something inside you is awakening. You're beginning to understand that silence is not weakness. Solitude is not absence. It is sacred space where your crown is formed until the end, because this isn't just a speech, it's a call. Call back to yourself, a call back to the kingdom within, because once you start walking alone, not out of bitterness, but out of purpose, you stop seeking the world and start building your own. And that is the beginning of unshakable strength. That is the path to mastery. That is how kingdoms are built, alone, in silence, step by step, until the world hears the footsteps of the king. The man who walks alone isn't lost. He's on a path that few have the courage to take. In a world that constantly screams for attention, connection, and conformity, choosing solitude is often misunderstood. People assume that if you're not surrounded by friends, if you're not constantly updating your life for the world to see, something must be wrong. But the truth is, real strength begins the moment you disconnect from the noise and begin to connect with yourself. When you walk alone, you are no longer playing by the world's rules. You're no longer driven by the applause of others or the validation that comes from being accepted. Instead, you begin to write your own story. You begin to face yourself, your fears, your flaws, your buried potential. Most people run from this encounter. They distract themselves with shallow relationships, endless entertainment, and surface-level goals. But the man who chooses solitude chooses growth over comfort. He understands that silence is the soil where greatness begins to bloom. In solitude, there's no one to blame, no one to impress, and no one to hide behind. That's where transformation begins. You confront your thoughts, your habits, your patterns. You begin to see who you really are without the masks. And that clarity, that brutal honesty, is where strength is born. Because when you're no longer pretending, when you're no longer living a borrowed life, you begin to tap into your real power. Strength isn't developed in crowds. It's developed in the quiet hours when no one is watching. It's built in the decisions you make when there's no pressure to perform. Alone, you learn to discipline yourself. You push your limits without needing someone else to motivate you. You get up early, not because someone told you to, but because the fire inside you won't let you sleep. You train your mind to stay focused, your emotions to stay balanced, and your spirit to stay unwavering. The man who walks alone begins to realize that his solitude is not an absence, it's a presence of purpose, a presence of self-awareness, a presence of unshakable will. This inner presence becomes his shield against manipulation, his anchor during chaos, and his compass when paths are unclear. And when the storms come, and they always do, he doesn't collapse. Like those who depend on others to stay afloat, he stands firm, because he's been through worse in his own mind. He's weathered internal storms that would shatter most. His solitude has trained him to bend, but never break. Over time, the man who walks alone becomes unrecognizable. Not because he changes his appearance, but because he changes his energy. He moves differently, speaks with intention, listens with awareness, acts without hesitation. And while the world may not understand him, it cannot ignore him. People begin to feel the difference. They sense that he doesn't need them to complete him. He's whole. He's rooted. And in a world full of needy, dependent, scattered energy, that kind of presence is rare. It's magnetic. It's powerful. But it all started with a decision to walk alone, to stop following the herd, to stop seeking safety in numbers. Because deep down, he knew greatness never grows in the comfort of the crowd. It grows in the fire of solitude, in the discipline of silence, in the mastery of self. So when you see a man walking alone, not lost, but deliberate, understand that you're looking at someone who's not running from the world. He's building something the world can't yet see, something real, something unshakable. He's building himself. And when a man builds himself, truly and fully, without shortcuts, without approval, without distraction, he becomes the kind of force that doesn't need to be loud to be felt. The kind of leader who doesn't chase a throne because he's already ruling from within. That is the man who walks alone. That is the man the world fears and quietly, deeply respects. Isolation is not a punishment. It is a passage, a silent rite that separates the ordinary from the exceptional. It's not about being rejected by the world. It's about choosing to leave behind what no longer serves your higher purpose. The man who walks this path willingly understands that mastery cannot be inherited, imitated, or handed down. It must be earned in the deepest chambers of one's own solitude. Initiation does not come with applause. It comes with silence. You step into it not with celebration, but with an eerie stillness that forces you to confront everything you've avoided. You look around and realize there is no guide, no blueprint, no cheering crowd, just you, your will, and the unknown. Most men turn back at this point. The discomfort is too much, the uncertainty too heavy. But the man destined for mastery pushes forward, because he knows that discomfort is the currency of transformation. Every great transformation begins with isolation, like the seed buried in darkness before it breaks through the soil. like the sword forged in fire before it ever shines in battle. That moment of separation from the familiar, from the crowd, from distractions, is not the end. It is the beginning. It's the beginning of self-discovery, of unlearning what was never yours, and awakening the dormant potential that can only emerge in stillness. In isolation, your false identities begin to die. The masks you wore to be liked, the roles you played to be accepted, the dreams you chased to impress others, they start to fall away, and it hurts. You realize how much of your life was a performance. But this is exactly what initiation demands. You must lose who you thought you were in order to become who you truly are. Mastery is not just about skill. It is about knowing yourself so deeply that no external chaos can shake your internal foundation. And that kind of knowing is only born in solitude. When you're isolated, your thoughts get louder. You start noticing the patterns, the excuses, the emotional triggers, the deeply rooted fears. It's uncomfortable. But that's the point. You can't master what you won't face. You can't change what you won't acknowledge. This is why the path to mastery is rarely crowded. Most would rather stay distracted, surrounded by people, consumed by noise, than face themselves in silence. But the man who chooses this path doesn't run from his shadow, he studies it. He learns to sit with it, speak to it, understand it. And in doing so, he integrates his darkness, making peace with the parts of himself that others would rather deny. This inner work, though invisible to the world, is the foundation of unshakable strength. Isolation teaches you resilience. When no one is there to save you, you learn how to save yourself. When there's no audience clapping for your effort, you learn to validate your own growth. And when there's no feedback, you become your own compass. This level of self-sufficiency is not arrogance, it's freedom. It's the ability to move through life without needing constant reassurance. It's the power to walk through chaos without losing your center. The man who has undergone this initiation walks differently. He doesn't speak to prove a point, he speaks to deliver truth. He doesn't react impulsively, he responds with clarity. He is calm under pressure, grounded in uncertainty, and firm in his convictions. Not because he read it in a book or watched it in a video, but because he lived it. He walked through the fire. He didn't skip the process. He earned his calm. That's what isolation does. It forces you to shed the superficial and refine the essential. You strip away what's borrowed and finally meet what's real. And in that realness you find your power, not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that anchors you through every storm. The kind that doesn't shout, but speaks with presence. The kind that doesn't chase attention because it commands respect without asking for it. When you find yourself alone, understand that you're not lost. You're being called into your initiation. You are being pulled into the furnace that burns away weakness and leaves only what is pure. Walk through it, embrace it, because the man who completes this journey doesn't return the same. He returns with vision, with strength, and with a calm authority that only isolation can build. He doesn't need to prove who he is. His life speaks for itself. He becomes the man others look to, not because he sought followers, but because he first learned to lead himself. And that leadership, that mastery, was born in the sacred fire of isolation. The world never sees the kingdom while it's being built. It only sees the crown once the foundation is finished. And that's the truth about greatness. It's crafted in silence, not in spectacle. The man who walks alone, away from distractions, applause, and comfort, knows that real power is built in private. He's not interested in impressing others while he's still constructing the structure of his life. Instead, he dedicates himself to the process layer by layer, day by day, with a quiet intensity most will never understand. Building a kingdom isn't about ruling over others. It's about creating an inner world so strong, so stable, that nothing external can shake it. And that level of strength doesn't come from shortcuts. It comes from discipline, from sacrifice, from making choices that nobody else sees or understands. It comes from saying no to distractions, temptations, and easy paths, not once, but over and over again. The man who walks alone makes these choices, not because someone is watching, but because he's watching himself. His standard is not applause. His standard is alignment with his values, with his vision, with the future he is quietly building. Every morning he wakes up before the world does, not to boast about it, but to make use of the silence. While others sleep, he sharpens his mind, his body, his focus. While others waste time seeking validation, he's building his fortress brick by brick through action, through discipline, through unwavering commitment. The kingdom he's constructing isn't made of gold or thrones. It's made of habits, mindset, emotional control, spiritual clarity, things the world can't see, but will one day feel. And when that day comes, when the results finally rise above the surface, people will say he came out of nowhere, but they'll never understand the years he spent in the shadows, the nights of doubt, the days of grinding without recognition, the battles he fought internally to silence the fear, the laziness, the urge to quit. He didn't need witnesses to validate his worth. He was too focused on laying the foundation, anchoring the structure that would one day carry the weight of something great. The man who walks alone becomes a master, not because he seeks the spotlight, but because he prepares for the moment long before it arrives. And when the moment does come, he doesn't flinch. He doesn't hesitate, because he's rehearsed it in solitude 1,000 times. His calm under pressure, his strength under scrutiny, it's not luck, it's legacy. It's the quiet reward of silent work. He understands that power built too fast is power easily broken. That's why he doesn't rush. He honors the process. He values depth over speed. While others want quick success and instant fame, he's focused on longevity. He's building something that lasts. A kingdom that cannot be shaken by criticism, betrayal, or circumstance. And the only way to build something that solid is to do it in silence, where the focus is pure and the vision is protected. Silence becomes his ally, not his enemy. In the quiet, he learns to listen to his thoughts, to his intuition, to the deeper voice within that guides him forward. There's no need to prove anything, because he is already proving it to himself. Every challenge becomes another stone in the wall. Every setback becomes another lesson in resilience. He doesn't just survive the silence, he thrives in it. And when the time comes to reveal what he's built, he doesn't do it with arrogance, he does it with certainty. Because he knows what it took, he knows what he gave, and he knows that what he's built cannot be taken lightly. It wasn't handed to him. It wasn't built with borrowed tools. It was carved from the bedrock of solitude, shaped by the chisel of discipline, and sealed with the silence of commitment. That's the truth. Kingdoms built in silence are the ones that endure. And the man who walks alone is the architect of such a kingdom. Not for the world to admire, but for himself to inhabit. Because when you've built something that no one can take away, you don't just hold power, you become it. Noise is everywhere, on our phones, in our conversations, in our minds. It's constant, relentless, and loud. Most people live in it without even realizing. They wake up to noise, go through their day in noise, and fall asleep with noise still buzzing in their ears. But in all that noise, something is lost. Clarity. Direction. The man who chooses to walk alone learns quickly that if he is to become anything beyond average, he must detach from the noise and embrace the silence that most people fear. While others fill their space with chatter, opinions, and distractions, he chooses stillness. He doesn't run from it, he runs to it. Because in silence, something powerful happens. The fog begins to lift, the chaos fades, and what's left is a sharpened awareness, a focused presence that can see what others miss. In the quiet, he doesn't just hear his thoughts, he understands them. He watches them rise and fall, and through that process, he learns to master them. This sharpening isn't accidental, it's intentional. The man who walks this path knows that every great achievement is born not in the external world first, but in the mind. And a cluttered, noisy mind cannot create a focused, disciplined life. Silence then becomes a weapon, a forge, a sharpening stone. And in that silence, the mind becomes precise, the vision becomes clear, and distractions lose their power. Most people are afraid of silence because they fear what it reveals. In the quiet, you're left alone with yourself. There's no music to drown out insecurity, no conversation to mask confusion, no scrolling to hide from your thoughts. That's why people avoid silence. They fear meeting their unfiltered mind. But the man who is building mastery seeks out that meeting. He understands that until you can face yourself in stillness, you'll always be controlled by the noise around you. And make no mistake, noise weakens. It steals your time, your attention, your energy. It scatters your thoughts, dilutes your will, and clouds your judgment. It's why so many people feel overwhelmed yet underaccomplished. They're busy reacting to everything around them, but rarely in control of what's within them. Silence is the antidote. In silence, the reactive mind transforms into the deliberate mind, and that's where strength is born. The man who embraces silence learns to sit with discomfort. He doesn't need to fill every second with stimulation. He trains himself to be still, to observe, to reflect. And this practice separates him from the masses, because when you master silence, you master response. You stop speaking just to speak. You stop reacting to every provocation. Your energy becomes calculated, deliberate, calm. And that calmness is intimidating because people don't understand how someone can stay so centered in a world that thrives on chaos. In silence, the man also gains foresight. When you're not lost in noise, you begin to notice patterns. You see the games people play, the motives behind words, the distractions dressed as opportunities. Your vision sharpens, your intuition strengthens. You make better decisions, not because you're smarter, but because your mind is clearer. While others are caught up in trends and opinions, you're rooted in principles. This mental sharpness affects everything. Your words become fewer but more powerful. Your actions become intentional. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop proving yourself constantly because your silence speaks louder than their noise. You let your results talk. You let your presence speak. And the world begins to notice not because you demanded attention, but because your energy demands respect. The man who walks alone knows this truth. Silence is not emptiness, it's space. Space to grow, to think, to recalibrate. It's a sacred environment where you shed the unnecessary and reconnect with what's essential. In that space you learn who you are and who you are not. You learn what you want and what no longer matters. And with that clarity you move through life like a blade through fog, clean, sharp, precise. This is why silence sharpens. It strips away the clutter. It teaches discipline. It trains the mind to focus. It exposes the ego, the lies, the noise, and in doing so it builds something unshakable within you. While others lose themselves in the world's distractions, the man who walks alone becomes increasingly found in his own truth. And when you live from that truth, You don't just survive, you lead. You don't just exist, you evolve. You walk with purpose, speak with power, and act with conviction. Because in the silence, you didn't just find peace. You found your edge. When a man walks alone and commits to mastery, he doesn't chase power, he becomes it. This transformation doesn't happen in a moment. It's forged through seasons of silence, discipline, and self-reflection. Over time, the external world loses its grip on him. He no longer seeks validation, approval, or applause. His value isn't determined by how many followers he has, or how loud his voice is in the crowd. His strength is quiet, his confidence is rooted, and his power radiates not from what he says, but from who he is. Power, real power, is not about controlling others, it's about controlling yourself. And that kind of self-restraint comes from isolation. When a man is alone, he's not being pulled in 100 directions. He isn't being influenced by the moods and opinions of those around him. Instead, he learns to master his thoughts, command his emotions, and act with purpose rather than impulse. This is where authority begins, not from dominance, but from discipline. In a noisy world filled with desperate energy and shallow confidence, a man who is calm, quiet, and centered is deeply unsettling. People can't read him, they can't manipulate him, and they can't ignore him. He doesn't explain every move he makes. He doesn't need to. His presence speaks volumes. That's because his power comes from within, not from titles, not from wealth, and certainly not from external recognition. It's a power earned through consistency, sacrifice, and years of inner work that most people aren't willing to do. Every time he chose to rise early while others slept, every time he chose discipline over indulgence, every time he trained his body, mind, and soul without needing praise, he built something. Something invisible, yet undeniable. The kind of energy that enters a room before he speaks. The kind of strength that doesn't flex, stands still, and commands respect. And the reason it's so powerful is because it's real. It's not borrowed, it's not dependent, it's his. This kind of power is magnetic, not because it tries to attract, but because it draws others by contrast. In a world of insecurity, the man who is sure of himself stands out. In a world of noise, his silence cuts through. In a world of endless talking, his rare words carry weight. People feel it even if they can't articulate it. They lean in when he speaks. They pause when he moves. Because he carries the weight of mastery within him, that mastery also makes him immune to petty distractions. He doesn't get pulled into gossip, arguments, or drama. He doesn't need to prove himself in meaningless conversations. He understands the value of his time, his attention, and his energy. And he guards them like a man who knows what they're worth. He isn't moved by flattery, nor is he broken by criticism. His power isn't fragile, it's what makes this power unshakable is that it's rooted in truth. He's not trying to be someone he's not. He's not performing. He's not seeking approval. Everything he does flows from a place of alignment with his mission, his values, his higher self. That alignment makes him dangerous, not in a destructive way, but in a disciplined way. Dangerous to those who thrive on control, manipulation, or superficiality, because they cannot sway a man who already knows who he is. Over time, this kind of man becomes a force, not because he seeks to dominate, but because he becomes undeniable. He leads without asking for permission, he influences without demanding attention, he inspires without needing praise. And that's the essence of true leadership. It begins with self-leadership. The man who has mastered himself is the one most fit to lead others, not because he seeks followers, but because he walks a path others wish they had the courage to follow. This is the man the world remembers, not the loudest, not the flashiest, but the most disciplined, the most grounded, the most internally fortified. His journey started in solitude, His strength was born in silence. His power was built in moments no one else witnessed. But the result? Unshakable, unmistakable. That's the kind of man who doesn't need a throne to rule. He rules from within. He doesn't chase power, he embodies it. The man who walks alone doesn't just find strength, he finds freedom. In his solitude he strips away all the layers of expectation the world has placed upon him, who he should be, what he should want, how he should act. Away from the noise, away from the gaze of others, he begins to see clearly. And what he sees is a truth few ever discover, that inner freedom is the most powerful form of wealth a man can possess. In the silence of his journey, he becomes deeply self-aware. He no longer acts out of obligation, fear, or desire for approval. He is not shackled by society's idea of success or manhood. He doesn't crave the spotlight, nor is he seduced by the need to impress. Instead, he begins to operate from a place of clarity, his own inner compass, sharpened by time, challenge, and solitude. And this compass points only in one direction: authenticity. With this authenticity comes an unshakable peace. Not the fragile peace that depends on external circumstances, but the enduring kind that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you stand for. The man who has cultivated this peace is no longer pulled by the tides of popular opinion. He doesn't bend to fit in. He doesn't shrink to make others comfortable. He speaks less, but what he says matters. He moves slowly, but always with purpose. This man cannot be bribed with praise or threatened with rejection. He's already faced the discomfort of being alone, and instead of breaking, he was refined. That's what the world doesn't understand. The man who walks alone has already lived through what most people spend their lives avoiding. He sat with his pain, questioned his beliefs, confronted his demons, and in doing so he became something different, something rare. He became free of attachment to outcomes. He learned to work in silence, build in obscurity, and grow without needing applause. He doesn't fear losing people because he never depended on them to complete him. He's not obsessed with control because he's already mastered the one thing that truly matters, himself. That self-mastery liberates him from the constant cycle of comparison, competition, and self-doubt. He creates his own standards. He defines his own success. This freedom becomes a kind of quiet confidence. He doesn't boast about it. He doesn't need to boast about it. But it's there in his posture, his presence, his decisions. He walks into a room and doesn't scan for approval. He doesn't shrink under judgment or overextend to be liked. He simply is. And that kind of presence makes people pay attention, not because he demands it, but because he embodies what they secretly crave: peace, power, and freedom. He becomes a mirror to others. Some admire him, others feel uncomfortable around him, not because he judges them, but because his very existence challenges them to look inward, to ask themselves hard questions, to consider what they've been avoiding, because deep down everyone feels the pull toward authenticity. But very few are willing to walk the lonely road required to reach it. That's the price of freedom. It's not handed to you, it's earned through years of sacrifice, introspection, and brutal honesty. The man who walks alone paid that price. He faced rejection, ridicule, and doubt. He let go of friendships that no longer served his mission. He outgrew environments that once felt safe. And he walked away from anything that dulled his spirit, not because he wanted to be alone, but because he refused to be a slave to anything, especially mediocrity. As he continues his journey, he no longer sees solitude as a punishment. He sees it as a sanctuary, a sacred space where he can hear his own voice clearly, where he can grow without distraction, where he can create from a place of integrity. This sanctuary becomes his source of renewal, of strength, of vision. When the world does see him, his success, his strength, his clarity, they will wonder how he became so unshakable. They'll look for secrets, techniques, shortcuts. But the truth is simple. He walked alone. He faced himself. He didn't run from the silence. He listened to it. And in doing so, he found not only himself, but a kind of freedom that no one could give or take away. This is the freedom that changes everything, the freedom to choose your own path, to stand in your own truth, to live by your own code. And once you have that, you don't need permission. You don't need praise. You simply move unapologetically, deliberately, powerfully, because you are finally free to be exactly who you are. The man who walks alone does not fear discomfort. He welcomes it. He knows that pain is the fire through which purpose is purified. While the masses seek comfort, distraction, and ease, he chooses the narrow path, the harder climb, the path that breaks you down before it builds you up, because he understands a truth that most refuse to accept. Pain is not the enemy, it's the teacher. Solitude, he begins to experience pain not as punishment, but as a signal. Every ache, every wound, every moment of struggle carries a message. It reveals what needs to be strengthened, what needs to be let go, and what must evolve. Most people numb their pain with noise, endless scrolling, pointless entertainment, shallow interactions. But the man who walks alone sits with his pain. He listens to it, he learns from it, and through that process, he transforms it into power. It's in pain that he discovers who he truly is. Not the image, not the projection, but the core, the raw, unfiltered self that lies beneath the ego. Pain peels back the layers. It forces him to confront what's real and discard what's false. He doesn't lie to himself, doesn't pretend to be unaffected. He breaks, but he breaks intentionally, like a seed breaking open in the soil. This transformation is not instant. It is slow, brutal, and deeply personal. Pain carves into his soul, not to harm him, but to hollow out space for wisdom, resilience, and depth. The man who walks through pain willingly becomes grounded. He learns patience. He learns endurance. He learns that victory isn't about who avoids suffering, but about who can carry it with purpose. And that's where he separates himself from others. He doesn't resist pain, he redefines it. Pain sharpens him. Like a blade against stone, it refines his discipline. Every failure, every rejection, every moment of isolation is repurposed. Instead of asking, why me, he asks, what is this teaching me? And in doing so, he gains insight most people miss. He no longer views suffering as a setback. It becomes his silent coach. While others collapse under hardship, he becomes more precise, more focused, more deliberate. Pain becomes his edge. And as he continues this journey, a quiet confidence begins to emerge. Not the loud, boastful kind that demands attention, but the unshakable kind that comes from surviving storms. He doesn't talk about how strong he is. He doesn't need to. You can see it in his eyes, in his stillness, in the way he carries himself. He has scars, yes, but those scars are symbols, not of defeat, but of battles won in silence. The man who walks alone does not just endure pain, he transmutes it. He takes the emotional weight others would avoid and molds it into fuel. Fuel for his mission, his vision, his discipline. While others run from their wounds, he integrates them. He knows that power isn't found in pretending to be unbreakable. It's found in being broken and choosing to rise again. Harder, wiser, cleaner. This process makes him resilient. The kind of resilience that cannot be taught in books or found in motivational slogans. It's a lived resilience, a tested strength. He's not afraid of pain because he's already met it. danced with it, used it. And now, pain no longer has power over him. This relationship with pain becomes one of the greatest sources of his power. He doesn't seek to suffer for suffering's sake, but he no longer avoids it. When challenges come, he faces them. When emotions rise, he feels them fully. And when life demands more, he gives more, not because it's easy, but because he's trained for this. Pain no longer deters him. It defines the path forward. This is what makes him untouchable, not because he is immune to hardship, but because hardship has become his companion. He does not crumble when life gets hard. He expands. He grows into the pain, turns pressure into presence, and turns wounds into wisdom. In doing so, he creates something unbreakable within himself, a force, a fire, a clarity that cannot be taken away. The next time pain comes, he does not run. He leans in. He knows what's on the other side. Growth, mastery, transformation. And he knows that the man who walks through pain alone emerges with something the world can never fabricate, true inner power. The kind of power that makes kings, not because they wear crowns, but because they've walked through hell and kept walking. The man who walks alone builds his own kingdom, not through conquest of others, but through conquest of self. His empire isn't measured in gold, territory, or subjects. It's carved out of discipline, vision, and unwavering inner authority. While others wait for someone to crown them, he rises without permission. He doesn't ask the world for validation. He doesn't need applause. He knows who he is, and from that knowledge, he builds. His kingdom is founded on values, on a code that doesn't bend under pressure. While society shifts like sand, chasing trends and opinions, he roots himself in timeless principles, honor, resilience, integrity, focus. Every decision he makes adds another brick to this inner empire. Every morning he rises with purpose. He expands it. Every night he reflects in silence. He strengthens it. This is how true kingdoms are built. Not by taking from the world, but by contributing to it from a place of grounded mastery. He doesn't rely on the external world to supply his identity. His sense of worth is not tied to his bank account, his status, or his followers. It's tied to his work ethic, his discipline, his truth. That's why he doesn't crumble when times get hard, because he's not performing. He's not pretending. He's living from within. His power isn't situational. It's foundational. And like any great king, he doesn't rule by fear, he rules by example. He leads himself first. He commands his thoughts. He manages his energy. He controls his emotions, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. He understands that no man can truly lead others until he can lead himself. So, while others chase external dominance, he masters internal order. His mind is sharp, his will is fortified, his spirit is unwavering. This inner empire gives birth to an outer reality. His actions align with his intentions. His habits reflect his values. His results mirror his discipline. He doesn't have to tell people what he's building. His life speaks for itself. You see it in his presence, in the calmness of his eyes, in the confidence of his silence. There's no arrogance, only certainty, because he knows he earned every inch of what he's become. The man who builds his kingdom alone also understands boundaries. He protects his peace like a fortress. He doesn't allow chaos to walk through his gates. He doesn't entertain distractions, petty drama, or energy-draining relationships. His time is sacred. His focus is guarded. And his purpose is non-negotiable. This discipline makes him rare, and it also makes him misunderstood. People may call him cold, distant, or antisocial, but that's only because they don't understand the weight of his mission. He's not here to fit in. He's here to rise, to build something that lasts long after he's gone. And that kind of legacy doesn't come from people-pleasing or surface-level success. It comes from structure, from vision, from consistency. While others wait for motivation, he acts. While others debate, he decides. While others drift, he builds with intention, with clarity, with resolve. This solitary path isn't for everyone. Most would rather blend into the crowd than stand alone on the mountain. But for the man who chooses this road, the reward is greater than anything society can offer. It's the quiet pride of knowing he did it himself, that he faced the darkness and walked through it, that he overcame doubt, fear, and temptation not by accident, but by choice. His kingdom may not look like others expect. It may not be filled with riches or fame, but it will be full of purpose, strength, and self-respect. And those who enter it, those rare few who understand his journey, will feel it instantly. They'll know they're standing in a space built not on fantasy, but on foundation. Not on luck, but on labor. He continues stone by stone, day by day, laying the structure of a life built in solitude, strengthened by pain, and elevated by vision. And in the end, when others look around and wonder how he became so powerful, so steady, so complete, he will smile, because he will know that while they were looking outward, he was building inward. And that is how a man builds a kingdom that cannot be shaken. The man who walks alone is not driven by ego, but by purpose. His solitude is not rooted in arrogance or detachment, it is rooted in clarity. He understands that chasing applause will only lead him in circles, so he lets go of the need to be seen, to be heard, to be celebrated. He detaches from the noise because he knows that greatness is never built in the spotlight. It's built in the shadows, through quiet work, through daily discipline, through unseen sacrifice. He doesn't care who's watching, he cares only that he's becoming. This man doesn't seek attention because attention is fleeting. What he seeks is alignment with his values, with his mission, with his higher self. He knows that the more he focuses on being liked, the further he drifts from truth. So he makes peace with being misunderstood. He lets go of trying to explain himself. He doesn't argue with those who doubt him. He doesn't chase recognition, because he knows that those who truly matter will feel his energy, even if they never say a word. He is committed to walking a different path, not the loud path of popularity, but the quiet path of mastery. He doesn't measure success by how many eyes are on him, but by how aligned he is with the man he is trying to become. And that man is not built in conversations. He is built in action, in consistency, in repetition. He rises early. He works in silence. He studies, reflects, trains, improves day after day without needing applause, because he knows that the real prize is not what the world gives you. It's what you become when no one's looking. This detachment gives him a rare kind of freedom. He is free from comparison because he's too focused on his own lane. He's free from judgment because he no longer seeks validation. He's free from fear because he's already faced the silence and learned to stand in it. This is the power of a man who's not trying to impress. He's not posturing. He's not pretending. He's just building. And that authenticity is what makes him untouchable. As he continues, the results begin to show. Quietly, steadily, his life transforms. People may not notice at first. Some may doubt him. Some may mock his silence. But over time, they begin to feel the shift. They see the discipline in his habits, the strength in his presence, the confidence in his stillness. And suddenly, the man they once ignored becomes the one they can't look away from. Not because he demanded attention, but because he outgrew their expectation. He doesn't need to tell the world who he is. He shows them through his work. Every action speaks louder than words. Every small, consistent step becomes a testimony. Every moment, he chose purpose over popularity, growth over comfort, silence over noise. It all compounds. Until one day, the very people who questioned him now look to him for answers. But he doesn't build for their approval. He never did. He builds because it's who he is. His craft is sacred. His mission is non-negotiable. And his focus is relentless. He's not trying to prove anyone wrong. He's trying to prove himself right, to become the man he knows he was meant to be. And that pursuit, that inner fire, keeps him grounded through every season of doubt and delay. This path is lonely, but it is not empty. It is filled with meaning, depth, and clarity. He doesn't fill his schedule to avoid being alone. He values solitude because that's where his wisdom sharpens. He's not distracted by trends, opinions, or gossip. He's too busy sharpening his sword, training his mind, aligning his heart. While the world rushes from one stimulus to the next, he walks slow and steady, refining himself into a man of substance. And when the world finally takes notice, when the results are undeniable, when people ask how he did it, he won't say much. Because the truth is, they weren't there when he was building in the dark. They didn't see the discipline, the setbacks, the pain, or the sacrifice. And that's okay. He never needed them to. He built not for their recognition, but for his own becoming. That is the quiet power of the man who walks alone. He doesn't broadcast his path. He just walks it with intention, with fire, with unshakable purpose. And one day, without needing to announce it, he stands on a mountain that no one thought he could climb. Not because he shouted, but because he walked, alone, with vision, with discipline, with truth. The man who walks alone is not truly alone, because he has built within himself a kingdom no external force can shake. His strength comes not from others, but from the mastery of his own mind, the discipline of his daily actions, and the clarity of his purpose. He understands that true power is silent, that lasting success is forged in solitude, and that the greatest victories are won with. So embrace the path of walking alone, not as isolation, but as the journey of becoming your most unbreakable self. Build your kingdom, quietly, steadily, and with unwavering faith in your own vision. Because when you do, you become unstoppable.